Hello and welcome to Fantastic Fights, a podcast about a middle-aged man playing adventure game books out loud on the internet. That middle-aged man is me, Hieronymus J. Doom, and this episode we're playing Night of the Necromancer by Jonathan Green with art by Martin McKenna. This is another book provided by the kindness of James Jewett, whose largesse is extremely appreciated here at Doom Towers. The cover art is the shield variant, which always feels like an odd design choice to me, but it does have a skeleton holding a glowing orb, which is absolutely cracking, so it's very much a win some, lose some scenario. Now, Night of the Necromancer is a chunky tome, weighing in at 450 paragraphs, and the average paragraph length seems a bit longer as well, which means we probably won't get to do more than dip a toe in this one, but it all adds to the variety. Jonathan Green and Martin McKenna is basically a dream team at this point in the podcast, and I cannot think of a better duo to kick off 2026 with. I hope all my listeners had a lovely holiday season, and hopefully 2026 brings some joy to all of us. Without any further ado, let's take a look at the rules. Although the core rules of fighting fantasy appear mostly unchanged, there's a few interesting elements that suggest this may well be a more experimental gamebook. So you do have skill, stamina and luck all present and correct, and you've also got one additional stat called Will, which begins at 6 and is described as a measure of your determination and strength of purpose. It can go both up and down, but cannot fall below 1. There's also an intriguing hint that when your stamina falls to 0, your adventure may not, in fact, be over. Additionally, you can't use provisions to regain stamina. No sausage rolls or cheese and onion crisps to recover from being stabbed here. A tragedy, but also something that piques my interest. In terms of equipment, we're very light, with only a backpack and leather armour, along with a magical sword called Night Slayer that can harm demons, undead and other magical creatures. I have rolled up a character called Retching Cranker, because that sounds like a suitably heroic name, and I really hope it's true that running out of stamina doesn't mean the end, because they are quite the sad sack with a skill of 8, a stamina of 16 and a luck of 10, plus the starting will of 6. They're going to need all the help they can get, I suspect. With all the preliminaries out of the way, let's play Night of the Necromancer. I've deliberately looked up nothing about this book because I just wanted to start the year with something that was as much of a surprise to me as anyone who might be listening. So, yeah, what's it going to be like? Let's find out. Dead Reckoning. As the sun sets, a ball of molten iron sinking into the chill waters of the Diamond Sea, you catch sight of Valsinor at long last. With shouts of "Yah!" you kick your heels into your horse's heaving flanks and spur it on towards the distant castle. By nightfall, you will be home. You have been away a long time, 3 years in fact. 3 years following the crusading banner of the Knights of Telak. 3 years spent in the accursed land of Bathoria, domain of demons and the lords of night. 3 years fighting the forces of darkness. Just checking to see if there's a map, and I don't think there is, which is a bit of a shame, but once again, we are in at least somewhat familiar territory, and I do appreciate Jonathan Green's willingness to make sure that the fantasy worlds he plays in do, to a good extent, agree with each other. In those 3 years, you have faced all manner of evils and found yourself in all kinds of life-threatening situations. In fact, you almost lost your life on more than one occasion. But you survived everything that the forces of darkness could throw at you, from an ambush by a pack of werewolves to the seductive enchantments of the sepulchral sisterhood, thanks in part to your knightly skills and prowess in battle, but also thanks to your sanctified charm-wrought sword, Night Slayer. And now at last your home is in sight once more. 3 years ago you set out from Valsinor Castle on the northern coast of Ruddleston to join in the crusade to purge Bathoria of the malign influence of the Cult of Death. With the defeat of the death mage Thanatos, your sworn oath fulfilled, you were free to return home. As you recovered from your last battle at the Hospice of the White Lady, you sent letters by messenger ahead of you, telling of your imminent homecoming. writing one to your sister, Oriana, who was anxiously awaiting news of your safe return, and another to your chamberlain Unthank, who you had left to look after your estates and safeguard the people of Sourstone Peninsula while you were away. And there is one other who you are eager to see again after so long, your faithful hound, who you left to watch over both the castle, but more particularly Oriana. Why do I get the distinct impression that we may have to stab a beloved family pet at some point because it's turned into a monstrous hellhound? I mean, maybe we won't. Maybe we'll get to find the beloved hound. But yeah, I feel as though with this kind of thing, you're definitely seeding something horrible happening. The sky purpling like a bruise as dusk descends, you guide your steed down off the bleak moorland road towards Valsinor Castle, not once taking your eyes off your ancestral home. It is clearly visible now, an imposing silhouette of rising battlements and looming towers. You can also see the village of Sleeth that lies close to the castle, in the shadows of the fortress, and before that, to the west, the brooding expanse of Wraithwood. To the east, the bleak, windswept moors continue as far as the eastern cliffs of the Sourstone Promontory. Whoa, a lot of made-up words and made-up places there. How many pages do I have to get through of this? Ooh, quite a few more. But before you reach home, the Moot Road takes you through the desolate wilderness that the ancient tribal people of this land once called home. Northern Ruddleston still bears the marks left by those ancient warrior clans. Burial mounds dot the landscape, along with time-worn druidic stone circles. You gallop past one such circle of standing stones known locally as the Nine Maidens, as the dusk continues to deepen around you. Desperate to be home now, after such a long time away. But it is in this treacherous twilight that the trap is sprung. Hooray! Something is happening. Hooray! 3 men, dark hoods pulled up over their heads to hide their faces, burst from their hiding places among the standing stones and come at you, armed with swords and axes. Your steed whinnies and rears up on its hind legs in surprise. Exhausted after your long ride, you are thrown from the saddle and land hard on the cold ground. Your horse panics and gallops away as your attackers bear down on you, weapons raised. You scramble to your feet, Night Slayer already in your hand. Ruffians like these shouldn't give you any real trouble, even in your weary state. But as the men close in on you with murder on their minds, you notice the 4th member of their band for the first time as he appears to coalesce from out of the gathering darkness. He is dressed from head to toe in long black robes, his face hidden behind a grotesque skull mask. The man does not appear to be armed, but in one hand he is holding a glowing sphere of amethyst that seems to swirl with a gathering storm. You have encountered his kind before, during your crusade to Bathoria. He is an acolyte of the priesthood of death himself. As you keep a watch on him out of the corner of your eye, you prepare to meet the would-be assassin's assault. They are no match for your knightly skills, and you have soon dealt all of them flesh wounds. In a few minutes, the battle will be over. But before you can finish the fight, the death-masked cultist casts his spell. A ball of crackling black light explodes from the acolyte's crystal, forms into a spear of energy that flashes past the beleaguered murderers and hits you full in the chest. You experience a moment of intense pain like you have never known before as the spell hurls you back onto the road. And then the pain is gone, leaving you feeling numb and cold. Who has done this to you, and why, when you were so close to home at last? You waste no time in getting to your feet and bringing your sword to bear once more. Your assailants suddenly stagger away from you, expressions of abject fear on their faces. Only the death acolyte appears unperturbed. You are used to intimidating your enemies, but you have never received quite such a reaction before. Has the spell made me grow one of those really unfortunate moustaches that seems to be coming back into vogue at the moment? Are they recoiling from a genuinely upsetting piece of face furniture? One of the men keeps looking down at the ground and then back up to you again, a look of utter, disbelieving horror on his face. In fact, he looks like he's seen a ghost. Curious to know what it is that has the thug so shaken, you glance down at the ground too. Bathed in an eerie luminescence is what appears to be a body. Judging by the scorched, ragged hole in the middle of its chest, you would guess that it is dead. For how could anyone survive such a grievous injury? It is only then that you realise that the body you are staring at aghast is your own. Standing over your dead body, you are a glowing, ethereal copy of yourself. Your ghostly form is dressed in the same apparel as your corpse, and you are even wielding a phantasmal duplicate of your sword Nightslayer, although the real thing is still lying on the ground next to your lifeless body. This might be the earliest I have technically died in any game book, because I've died, admittedly not in a way that's going to take, before even the first paragraph. So yeah, that is almost certainly a new record. The shock you feel at realising you are dead is nothing compared to the rage and desire for revenge that consumes you now. There will be a reckoning this night, when all those responsible for your untimely death will be made to pay for the evil they have perpetrated against you. Screaming like a banshee, you move to engage your murderers in battle. You go. So we now go to section 1. Okay, it's a bit overlong as an intro, but it is still really good. It sets up a truly unusual situation that I am dying to see what the ramifications are of. Is that a sentence? It is now. Yeah, I'm really intrigued, delighted to see yet another fascinating twist on the age-old formula of someone needs to go do a quest. As you stalk towards the murderous thugs, one of the men gives voice to a terrified scream. His face draining of all colour, he turns tail and flees. Another drops his weapon in shock, while the third lets out a whimper of fear and collapses to his knees, sobbing like a baby. Only the death acolyte appears to be holding things together, his hands moving over his crystal ball, his lips forming the words of some esoteric invocation. These men are responsible for your death, and you will have vengeance upon them. But which will you confront first? The 3 terrified murderers, or the spell-casting death acolyte? I think we'll go for the acolyte. Always kill the spellcasters first is just a good rule of thumb in life, I would say. If you ever find yourself in a life or death struggle, and there's a wizard or a witch involved, then go for them first. That's what I say. As the 3 murderers flee in terror, you turn on the individual who actually dealt the killing blow against you. Do you want to strike down the acolyte immediately, without showing him any mercy after what he did to you? Or do you want to demand some answers from him, in an attempt to discover who it was that ordered your death? I mean, the smart money is on trying to wrangle some answers, but where's the fun in that? I feel as though as a banshee howling avatar of post-mortem vengeance, the most important thing is to just go with it and try and strike this acolyte down. Resisting the pull of the death acolyte's spell, you rush at the black-robed spellcaster, shrieking in fury. I'm so cross. A shocked expression enters the man's eyes and he starts to back away from you. But he is not done with his magic yet. Still holding the crystal ball in one hand, he begins another conjuration. Not waiting to see what it is he's attempting to cast now, you join in battle with the Death Acolyte. The Death Acolyte has a skill of 7 and a stamina of 7. I have a skill of 8, a stamina of 16. If the Acolyte wins an attack round, something happens. And if we get him down to 3 stamina or fewer without him wounding us, then something else happens. So I might as well do this live, honestly. It's not going to take that long. So a little special New Year's treat for everyone. Live combat. So the Death Acolyte's attack strength in the first round is 16. That's pretty good, I'll be honest. My attack strength is 13. So I lose 2 stamina, taking my stamina down to 14. And I immediately have to turn to a new section. Rather than fighting back with an ordinary weapon, the Acolyte defends himself by blasting you with more of his dark magic. One of these bolts of black energy hits you and you are consumed by pain. It is as if the Acolyte's spell has burned your ethereal form and causes you 2 stamina points of damage. So we then continue the fight as normal. If we reduce the Death Acolyte's stamina to 3 points or fewer, something happens. But if we get reduced to 0 stamina, then we have to write down a number on our adventure sheet and go to section 100, which is nice and easy to remember. So, yes. I may as well continue with the fight on mic, why not? Chance for you to all hear exactly how bad I am at rolling dice. So the Death Acolyte rolls another 9, giving him an attack strength of 16 again. But I get an 11 this time, so thankfully I have managed to wound the Death Acolyte, taking him down to 5 stamina. So I've just got to win one more attack round. He's rolled a 9 again, and this time his 16 is higher than my 15, so I get wounded a second time, taking my stamina down to 12. Okay, this is starting to get weird. He's rolled another 9, but I've rolled a 9 and I've got a higher skill than him. So I now have reduced him to 3 stamina points, and so we go onwards. But that is weird. That's one of the things that's endlessly fascinating to me about random chance, is that you do get these peculiar runs of things that feel as though they shouldn't really happen. There's no way that a monster should have only rolled 9s in combat, but nonetheless roll enough dice and that is going to happen. And it's one of the reasons why, if you ask humans to generate random numbers, they're very, very poor at it. We fundamentally can't do it. It's not something that the human brain is set up to do. If you ask a human being to generate random numbers, the numbers they generate will be very, very evenly spread out among the range of numbers available. Something that's true of random samples over a large enough sample size, but isn't true when you're taking relatively small samples, such as the combat I just did. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. We have defeated the Death Acolyte, and we get to carry on. As the Death Acolyte starts to succumb to the force of your wrathful vengeance, a look of panic enters his eyes. He abruptly quits his spellcasting and instead hurls the crystal ball at your feet. The amethyst sphere explodes with the force of the black energies bound within it. For a moment, everything goes black, and then the light of the rising moon returns, and the world appears once more around you, limned in monochrome radiance. But of the Death Acolyte, there is no sign. So we've got a nice simple mission. We've got to try and find this swine and continue the stabbing that we've begun. With the murderous magic user gone, you are still no closer to understanding why you were killed. You return to your body and gaze down upon the cooling corpse. It is a strange feeling to be looking at your own dead body. You know that you will not be able to rest now until you have solved the mystery of your own murder and exacted your revenge against the ones who wanted you out of the way. But where will you go first in your search for answers? You gaze out across the windswept promontory towards the distant Valsinor castle. Ahead of you, directly to the north, lies the village of Sleeth, the castle a black shadow now against the horizon behind it. To the northwest lies the tangled expanse of the Wraithwood, where, rumour has it, a wise woman dwells. Perhaps she could help you in your search for answers. To the northeast, the moors peter out at the edge of the sea, where, when you were last there, at least, a hermit monk dwelled down on the seashore. Perhaps he might be able to help you. However, to the east you can see the dark hill of a burial mound, and you feel a strange pull to this place that you cannot explain. Just as you do, in fact, to the stone circle of the 9 maidens where you were attacked. So we've got a few different options there. My natural instinct is always going to be to seek out the first available old man, because if there's one thing we've learned, it's that in a pinch you can always rely on an old man. But I really like the gothic overtones and the folk horror overtones of being drawn to the various druidic monuments that seem to be all over this part of Ruddleston. So I'm going to succumb to the lure of the Nine Maidens, I think. I will always tend to go for the one that feels most narratively appropriate on a first playthrough. I think it's because it's the first playthrough where you really get the most chance to kind of role play as the character you're being told you inhabit, and on subsequent playthroughs the book becomes more of a puzzle to be solved. So yeah, I do like to really try and take that opportunity to do what feels narratively right early doors, rather than just doing what seems to be the most logical path. Unable to resist the curious attraction of the Nine Maidens, you approach the standing stones, feeling the ground beneath your feet with every ethereal step you take. Although the heather passes through you as though your body were nothing but smoke. Where to your mortal eyes the Nine Maidens looked like nothing more than a circle of weathered stones flecked with moss and lichen, you can now see tendrils of eldritch power rising into the night sky like coruscating trails of multicoloured flame, and you can hear the plaintive singing of women, although you can see none. You come to a halt at the centre of the stone circle before a horizontal altar stone, marvelling at the writhing tendrils of ethereal energy. And then, as you stand there listening to the mournful voices of the invisible women, those same tendrils of energy are inexorably drawn towards you. At the same time, you feel yourself imbued with otherworldly strength. The Nine Maidens have chosen a champion and worked their magic upon you. Add 1 point to both your initial skill and stamina scores, and then raise those scores to their new initial levels. Regain 1 luck point and add 1 to your will score. Whoa. So skill now 9, much more respectable. Maximum stamina now 17. And will now 7. Very nice indeed. An interesting way that he's chosen to phrase that: add 1 point to both your initial skill and stamina scores, and then raise those scores to their new initial levels. That is a proper games designery bit of writing. Nice, tight rules text, very hard to misinterpret, albeit slightly clunky to read. Standing just before the Nine Maidens on the crest of the hill are 3 stones joined to form a stone archway. Within the portal formed by these monoliths, you can see a spiralling vortex forming. A gateway to another world is opening in front of you. Will you pass between the stones and through this otherworldly portal, wait to see what happens, or try to leave the stone circle? Like I say, I'm going to go with what feels narratively appropriate. I don't think standing around feels like a pathway to supernatural vengeance. I'm going to pass through the stones and into this otherworldly portal. Boldly, you step forward into the shimmering light that fills the space between the stones. You suddenly feel numb to the bone, like you have never known. At least you would, if you still had any bones. And then you know that somehow you are no longer on the earthly plane. Record the number 288 on your adventure sheet and then turn to section 100. Interesting that we could have got here without passing through the portal. We could have just been stabbed here by the Death Acolyte. And then you are no longer upon the earthly plane, and the dead winds are carrying you over to the other side of the veil that exists between the world of the dead and the world of the living. Before you lies a barren expanse of grey rock and sand. Above, the sky is as grey as the ground and full of dark storm clouds in turmoil. Thunder rumbles over distant mountains that rise to jagged black peaks that seem to claw at the storm-racked sky. So we now have to check for a number of code words. Endgame, Judgment, Watcher, Devourer are the ones that could push us to a different location. I'm glad to see that Jonathan Green has abandoned his habit of doing code words by writing words backwards. That's pleasing to me. But yeah, I don't have any of those code words yet, so something else is going to happen. The dead winds pull you over the bleak and rugged terrain towards the edge of a mighty gulf that bisects the scarred landscape. In the distance, in the shadow of the rumbling storm clouds, you can see an arched gate made from monolithic blocks of obsidian. An avenue of standing stones forms a processional path that ultimately leads to the gate. You can feel yourself being inexorably drawn towards it, but you cannot shake the feeling that if you pass beyond the stone arch, there will be no going back. You begin to rail against your fate. You have unfinished business in the mortal realm. You will not go willingly into the lands of the dead, knowing that your murderer has yet to be brought to justice in the world above. So, now roll 2 dice. If the total roll is less than equal to your will score, something happens. If it's greater, something else happens. If the total roll is less than or equal to your will score, you add the code word Devourer as well. So, let's see what happens. I roll a 9. Another 9. What is it with 9s? What is it with 9s? Yeah, I'm rolling the dice. Yeah, and it's just random. There's nothing wrong with the dice. The dice are absolutely fine. But yeah, another 9, which is higher than my will, so I don't get to write Devourer down, and we go and find out what happens. No matter how much you fight their pull, the dead winds draw you onwards, ever closer to the black gate. And then you see that something is dragging itself towards you across the avenue of stones. It appears to be incorporeal like you, with a squat, ethereal toad-like body, although this particular toad would be the size of a horse. Broad front limbs and a gaping shark-like maw complete the image. Everywhere it goes, it leaves a slimy trail of ectoplasm behind it. From the top of its head, myriad eye stalks sway like the fronds of a sea anemone, while other tendrils emerge from the side of its body. As you are drawn towards this hideous apparition by the relentless wind, you are even more horrified to see that the wavering fronds of its eye stalks are not eye stalks at all. Each one ends in a small, snapping mouth. The creature raises a slime-dripping foot, and you see that too ends in a toothed maw. The phantasmal creature is almost nothing but mouths. And then, with a croaking cry, the Sin Eater is upon you, ready to devour your soul. Restore your stamina score to half its initial level, plus as many more stamina points as is equal to your current will score, and prepare to fight. So actually my stamina was already brought back to maximum 17, so that's fine. I guess that only applies if your stamina is less than that total. Anyway, the Sin Eater has a skill of 8 and a stamina of 8. There's no picture of it, which feels like a real missed opportunity, because this is a really unusual looking monster. But there is a special rule. If the Sin Eater wins an attack round, roll 1 die. If you roll a 6, as well as taking the usual damage, you must also reduce your skill by 1. If we defeat it, we add the code word Watcher to your adventure sheet. If it wins the fight, it hurls your savaged soul even closer to the gate. So let's hope we can beat the Sin Eater. With its skill of 8 and a stamina of 8, I should be fine, but I know much better than to count my chickens before they're hatched. So I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the Sin Eater and added the code word Watcher to my adventure sheet. It hit me once, did not manage to drain any skill, and so yeah, my stamina is now 15. You will not go willingly into the dark. You have yet to avenge your untimely death. You feel the pull of the dead winds lessen, and then a sensation as of rising from the depths of some fathomless ocean overwhelms you, and you are floating upwards towards a brightening light high above you. The light is blinding, forcing you to close your eyes. The sensation of upward motion ceases, and you open your eyes and find that you are back in the real world. You have been given another chance, and more than that, you have been revitalized. Restore your skill, stamina and luck to their initial levels and add 1 to your will score. So, stamina back to 17, will back to 8. It's nice the skill gets added, because I was about to do a short disquisition on how awful feeling skill drain is, but yeah, happily, it's only really for that one combat, so long as you win it. Now turn to the paragraph with the number you wrote down before you found yourself at the very threshold of the afterlife. So that's really cool that we've found out what happens if you die. That's really good. For once, my chronic Death Wish in Adventure Game Books has actually unravelled a really fascinating part of the game book. I'm really pleased to be able to show that off, honestly. But what happens now? The instant you pass beyond the boundary formed by the stones again, the ethereal light fades and the otherworldly portal closes. Which way do you want to go now? East towards the burial mound? North towards the village? Northwest towards Wraith Wood? Or northeast towards the sea cliffs? I mean, is the burial mound going to be equally awesome? Or do I want to do something else? I do feel the pull of the old man at this point, so I'm going to go and do that. To reach the steep cliffs that border the Grimcrag coast, you must first cross the undulating terrain of the Barrowmoor, named so after all the ancient tumuli that dot the landscape in this far-flung corner of the kingdom. The moon is climbing steadily into the sky as night lays claim to the land. A dreadful howl suddenly shatters the eerie silence of the moors, carrying you over the chill wind that is blowing in from the sea. You are reminded at once of the story your father told you, and your sister, when you were both still children, the legend of the Black Dog of Barrowmoor. The Black Dog, or Barghest as legend also knows it, is a phantom dog, the howling of which precedes a death in the family. But on this particular night it would appear to be a little late. After all, you're already dead. With a savage snarl, ghostly jaws slavering at the prospect of feasting on your soul, its eyes burning coals, the Barghest materialises out of the night in front of you. You had thought this hellhound to be nothing but a ghost story used to bring disobedient children into line. And it is a ghost story, only now you're in it. So the Barghest has a skill of 7 and a stamina of 6. Possibly my favourite name for the various black dogs of folklore is Barghest. Yeah, the Barghest of Whitby was a popular Yorkshire version of the black dog myth. Here in the Midlands, I believe Black Shuck is the usual name for the phantasmal black dogs of one form or another. One of the interesting things about the black dog phenomena in folklore is that they're not always evil. They're not always harbingers of some doom. There's a lot of stories of travellers being helped out by a mysterious black dog as well. Anyway, the black dog's phantasmal claws can harm you just as if you and the dog were both living creatures. If the Barghest's savage attack should kill you, write the number 171 on your adventure sheet and go to the familiar 100. If you manage to defeat the dog as its spirit dissipates on the wind, you feel your own ghostly body absorbing some of the Barghest's power, and you luxuriate in the new strength flowing through your ethereal form, which will allow you to regain up to 3 stamina points, which is pretty neat, and a very clever way of regaining stamina. Like, really, really clever. I'm going to be talking about that at the end, I have no doubt. Anyway, as it is, Barghest skill 7, stamina 6. I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the Barghest and I took no damage whatsoever, so that's pretty cool. So even though I do get my ghostly body absorbing Barghest strength, it just doesn't matter. I'm going to already be on maximum stamina. Having rid yourself of the Black Dog of Barrowmoor, you set off again for the sea cliffs. Before long you are negotiating the goat track that leads from the windswept moors to the pebbled beach and dark sea below. Your feet make no sound as you walk over the pebbles. The only sounds are the wash of the tide and the rattle of stones tumbled by the breakers. Ahead of you, further along the headland, you can see a cave mouth that stands above the band of seaweed left by the tide, illuminated by a crackling driftwood fire. This must be the hermit's home. You only hope he can help you. And then he's there, standing in the entrance to his cave, staring out into the night at the moonlit breakers. "Hello? Is there anybody there?" He is dressed in a plain grey habit, tied at the waist with rope, a long, straggly grey beard clinging to the hollows of his hunger-lean face, although the top of his head is completely bald. Then he sees you and his ruddy complexion pales in the moonlight. Test your luck. So, how is he going to respond to us? My luck is 10 and I roll an 8. He's fine. Luck now 9. It's a really good use, actually, for luck, is using it to randomise reactions from monsters and NPCs is a really, really good idea. I really like that. It's a design space that hasn't been massively explored in the series. It could get frustrating, I guess, on repeated playthroughs, particularly if there's specific things that are gated behind it, but seems like a really, really good idea. Really, really good place to use luck. I warn you, little spirit, stay back, the old man says. I have a little art of my own. Do not provoke me, as I shall have no qualms about using it against you. Now be gone. The hermit does not seem particularly concerned by the fact that he's being visited by a ghost, so perhaps he really does have some magical means of defending himself. He certainly doesn't appear to be carrying a weapon of any kind. Do you want to continue to approach the curmudgeonly hermit, or will you leave the old man in peace and return to the cliff top? No, I want to talk to the old man. I'm absolutely convinced that the old man should be able to help me. In the name of Hamaskis, begone! The hermit suddenly shouts, and waving his hands frantically before his face, sends a bolt of searing golden life blasting into your incorporeal body. The prayer spell burns like fire. Roll 1 die and lose that many stamina points, and lose 1 will point too. So, let's see how many stamina we lose. We lose 1, yeah. Stamina now 16, will now 7. If you are still alive, will you now leave the hermit in peace with your ghostly form intact, or will you persist in your questioning of the querulous old man? No, I'm going to carry on questioning him. Stay back, the old man shouts, or I shall smite you again with my magic. The look in the man's eyes suddenly dramatically changes from one of determined resolve to one of slack-jawed horror. It is then that you hear the splashing sounds of something wading from the breakers behind you, accompanied by a croaking cry. Oh no, please, the old man cries. Not that, anything but that. You turn to see the most appalling abomination emerge from the rising tide and stalk towards you up the beach. It walks on 2 legs like a man and has the muscular build of an ogre, but its skin is covered with blue-grey scales. It has cruel, gutting claws. Its fingers are webbed and its bulbous eyes are those of a fish. A crest of spines protrudes from its head and runs all the way down its back to a long, lashing fishtail. The creature opens its mouth, revealing a maw full of shark's teeth, while the slits of gills in its neck open and close uselessly in the air. My tormentor comes to plague me again. Oh, woe! My doom is upon me! The hermit cries and retreats back into his cave, leaving you to face the monster alone. The fish beast fixes its eyes upon you and gives another croaking snarl as it continues to stalk towards you. This is no mere creature of flesh and blood, but a demon birthed from the storm-racked sea. So the monster's cruel fish talons will harm you just as well as if you were still a creature of flesh and blood yourself. Fortunately, your own ethereal copy of Nightslayer will also be able to injure the demon. Let battle commence. So the sea demon has a skill of 9 and a stamina of 10. I'm going to roll some dice. This should be a close run thing, I reckon, but the stats say I should be fine, but I might end up losing quite a lot of stamina, I think, to this monstrosity, and it could perfectly easily kill me. Anyway, we'll find out. I'm going to roll some dice. I have defeated the sea demon. It reduced me to 8 stamina points. And I also burned a point of luck to deal double damage in the last round because I was starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable about how close it was getting to defeating me. So, if you manage to slay the demon as its fishy carcass falls back into the sea and is washed away, the hermit suddenly runs out of his cave and down the beach towards you. Add the phrase something fishy to your adventure sheet and turn to the next section. I know you, Murthin the hermit gasps. You're from the castle, but I've not seen you these 3 years past, and now here you are, at my door, as it were, a ghost to boot. What happened to you? Your voice echoing strangely on the sea breeze, you tell the hermit all that has passed since you were struck down on the road. But who would employ a servant of darkness like a death acolyte to do away with you? Merthin asks, appalled. Although, that said, there has been a disturbance hereabout for some time now. Talk of strangers at the castle, people beset by restless dreams, and the black dog has been heard to howl again. I've heard it said that Burgomaster Jurgen of Sleeth has even gone so far as to call on the services of a ghost hunter. Merthin certainly seems to know a lot, especially for a hermit who's supposed to have cut himself off from the rest of society. Talk of strangers at Valsinor concern you and make you wonder as to your sister's safety. You've seen evidence yourself of other hauntings, but the mere mention of a ghost hunter has you intrigued. As he's in such a talkative mood and apparently not fazed by your spectral nature, you decide to press the hermit for more information. But what will you ask him about? Recent goings-on at the castle, your sister, or the ghost hunter? I'm going to ask about my sister. I mean, look, most murders are committed either out of passion, but the ones that aren't, it's usually money, power, or revenge. Those are your kind of big 3 motivators for your considered murder, certainly in this kind of context. And as the Lord of the Manor, I feel as though the most obvious suspect has got to be my sister. She's presumably been ruling in my absence. I would suggest you might quite like to carry on ruling afterwards. So either her or the seneschal who's been appointed by me in the past. Either way, I feel as though my sister's the most obvious suspect to start with. The Lady Oriana, you mean? Merthin says when you mention your sister. Oh yes, she's still there, although I hear she's made herself a virtual prisoner. Hasn't left the castle in over a year. Then how do you know she's still safe and well? You challenge the old man. Because I've seen her every day. She gazes out of her apartment window, back along the road across the moors, a crucifix clutched in her hand, as if she's desperately awaiting the return of someone. He breaks off. Oh, that would be you, wouldn't it? Everything Merthin has told you about your sister makes you more desperate than ever to find out what's going on. It is time you are on your way again. Do you have the phrase something fishy written on your character sheet? I surely do. Leaving the beach, you return to the cliff tops and from there set out across the moors in the direction of Valsinor Castle. But then a crossroads comes into view. Sort of sounding like she might be a prisoner and maybe Unthank, who you left to look after estates and safeguard the people of Sourstone, might be the most obvious villain now. But anyway, let's have a look at this crossroad. At the crossroads you peer ahead into the darkness and decide which way to proceed. The moorland road that you've been following continues straight ahead into the village of Sleeth. A narrower but equally well-trodden path lies westwards towards the cemetery that lies outside the village, while a gravelled road bears north-east before turning north again, leading towards the stone bridge over the River Sorrow that must be crossed on the way to Valsinor Castle. So which way will you go now in your quest for revenge? I think we'll go straight towards Valsinor Castle, I think. As you approach the sturdy stone bridge, you hear the clip-clopping of hooves, and then another spectre materialises in front of you. It is that of an old knight from ages past, and his noble steed, faithful even unto death and beyond. The ancient knight is unhelmeted, a flowing white beard hanging down over his torn tabard and battered breastplate. He has a lance couched at his side. "Halt!" he calls out in a reedy voice, challenging you. "No spirit may pass." Are you determined to cross the knight's bridge, or would you rather submit to the knight? Alternatively, you could try wading across the river and not worry about the bridge at all. There's a picture of the knight and his spooky horse, and yep, it's very good. Very good. Castle in the background. McKenna's used a lot of dark bricks and a looming dark presence of the castle to sort of highlight how pale and ghost-like the apparition is. He's not made it particularly see-through except for the very bottom of the horse's hooves, which I think is a nice touch. I think if you try and make it too see-through, you end up losing the image itself. I'm quite tempted to see what happens if you wade across the river, because it's not like I'm going to drown, is it? Sometimes maybe you can't cross running water, but I do want to give it a go. I want to give it a go. It just strikes me as an interesting approach to take. Stepping off the track that leads over the bridge on the way to Valzinor Castle, you scramble down the bank to the river's edge. Far to your right, the stream tumbles over the edge of the Sourstone headland and into the sea so far below as a dramatic waterfall. But you are a strong swimmer, and the river isn't particularly wide here, so you see no reason why you shouldn't be able to cross safely. You're sure the knight's ghost is bound to the bridge, so what's the worst that can happen? Besides, you're a ghost. You'll only need to wring out your shroud once you get to the other side, and so you step into the fast-flowing stream. It feels like you have been struck by lightning as crippling pain sears through your body and you are hurled back from the river to land on the bank, your ghostly form contorted in pain. Running water is anathema to the ranks of the undead, and no matter how much you might hate the fact, you are now one of the undead. Roll 1 die, add 2, and deduct the total from your stamina score. Oh, I could die here. No, I rolled another 1, so I'm fine. Down to 5 stamina. The absence of any kind of spectral provisions really starting to take its toll at this point, but it does provide a unique vibe to the game as well, not being able to gain stamina back quite so easily. The pain begins to pass and you are able to pick yourself up again, but you are still on the wrong side of the river and so are forced to approach the bridge. Halt! The knight challenges you again. I have sworn to guard this crossing in Valzinor Castle from evil spirits, and you will not pass. To proceed any further, you are either going to have to engage the knight in battle or submit to him. I wonder what happens if we submit. Remaining precisely where you are, you call out to the ghostly knight. I submit. The knight looks somewhat taken aback. You what? He splutters in bewilderment. You submit? I submit, brave Sir Knight. No one has ever submitted before, he mumbles to himself. Then what are you doing here? The knight asks. Why do you seek to cross this bridge? And so you relate your sorry tale to the ancient warrior, hoping that your rhetoric and noble motivations might persuade him to relent and let you pass. Test your skill. Oh, this is cool. This is really cool. I mean, this whole book is really cool, to be honest. Got a couple of reservations about how much fun it's going to be repeatedly having to do the Lands of the Dead bit if I end up dying multiple times, but, I mean, it's just really cool. Yep, I have passed my skill test. Please forgive Sir Calormain for being a wits-addled old fool, the knight says, sagging in his seat at the saddle. I have watched this bridge for so many centuries, I can no longer tell friend from foe. He suddenly looks small and pathetic. I am so very tired, he says wearily, the exhaustion apparent in his hollow cheeks and sunken eyes. I have been guarding this crossing point in Valzinor these last 300 years. Well, now I am here to relieve you of that duty, you say, for it is my sworn mission to cleanse this place of evil once and for all. The knight peers at you through rheumy eyes and smiles weakly. Thank you, he says, and promptly vanishes, but for a moment the knight's voice lingers on the wind. Take this, my gift to you. You suddenly feel yourself filled with new energy. Add 1 to your will score. Roll 1 die and add 2. Regain up to this number of stamina points and 1 luck point. Great. So, will now 8 again. That's handy. Stamina now 14. That's pretty good. Luck now 8. And then you come before the main gate of Valzinor Castle. This was the place where you and your sister played as children, and which became your responsibility on the death of your father at 70 years old, and who had himself been widowed many winters before. But your ancestral home appears anything but welcoming to you now. Its high crenulations loom over you, while its torchlit windows seem to stare down with malignant intent. There is an oppressive atmosphere hanging over the place. You have seen neither hide nor hair of the Death Acolyte since your encounter with him and his murdering band on the Moor Turnpike, but you can't shake the feeling that the truth you are searching for will be found within your castle home. But how do you plan on gaining access? 2 guards armed with halberds are on sentry duty before the main gate. However, you do know of another way in. Across the eastern wall of the outer ward of the castle is a culvert, a drain that lets filth and waste water out under the wall and down over the cliff edge into the sea. The prospect of crawling up a sewer, even if you are a ghost, does not fill you with glee, and staring up at the looming walls you wonder what it would be like to soar over them in your spectral form. Do you want to try and fly over the battlements, try gaining entry through the culvert, or would you rather simply approach the main gate and the guards on duty there? I mean, I feel as though they'll probably run away if I rock up, so I'm going to go straight through the front door, I think. It's still my castle. I suppose it's my sister's castle now, technically. But, I'm still a member of the family. The main entrance to Valsinor Castle stands within the imposing edifice of the outer gatehouse. 2 guards stand on duty here, but there are other defences besides them, including the sturdy gates themselves, a heavy iron portcullis, murder holes, a siege ballista, and a second portcullis. Nobody gets in or out unless the castellan wills it. But that person should be you, and right now you are on the wrong side of the gate. As you move in sight of the gate, you consider what would be the best way to gain entrance. If you have the Spectre ability and wish to use it, you may. If you have the Shade special ability and wish to use that, that's also an option. If you possess neither of these abilities or do not wish to use them, you'll just have to approach the gatehouse as you are. So, there's some interesting hints of things we can pick up along the way there. Very intriguing. Suddenly finding themselves in the presence of an undead spirit, the guards howl in terror and, falling over themselves, spring into action. "Raise the alarm!" one of them cries, helping his companion pull back the heavy bolts holding the gate shut and heave the gate open. As soon as there is a gap wide enough for him to squeeze through, he legs it into the outer ward of the castle, as if the very hounds of hell were after him. The other tugs furiously at a chain pull beside his sentry post, and somewhere, away within the castle, a bell begins to toll. Add the word bell to your adventure sheet. However, as well as raising the alarm, in their haste to pass on their dire warning, the guards have also left the gate open, allowing you to slip inside. Regain 1 luck point. Luck now 9. You are inside the castle at last, within the courtyard of the larger outer ward to be precise. Overhead, the moon hangs like a silvery orb amidst the backdrop of a myriad stars, limning the buildings in its monochrome light. You take a moment to reacquaint yourself with your castle home, having been away for so long. It appears to be as you remember, but you can sense a sinister atmosphere hanging over it like a funerary shroud. Flitting through the air above the castle is a multitude of incandescent ethereal forms, spiralling and moaning on the chill wind coming in off the Diamond Sea. In the south-eastern corner of the courtyard is the familiar thatch-roofed structure of the smithy, where you would quite happily while away hours at a time of your youth, watching the blacksmith at work, forging weapons, repairing armour and shoeing horses. Opposite the smithy, against the western wall of the outer ward, are the castle stables, and a little further along, abutting the northern wall that divides the outer ward from the inner, is the sturdy stone blockhouse that is the guard barracks. Guarding the entrance to the inner ward, the Barbican is an imposing 3-storey tower, more like a small keep than a mere gatehouse. Next to the Barbican, steps lead up to the battlements, while below them, against the east wall, are the kennels, where the lords of Valsinor have kept their hunting hounds ever since your ancestors had the fortress constructed centuries ago. You still have no real idea about who ordered that you be killed or where the Death Acolyte fled to, but you have an overwhelming feeling that inside the castle is where you will find answers you so desperately seek. So there's a choice of places to visit: the smithy, the stables, the guard barracks, the battlements, or the kennels. Or you can make for the inner ward approaching the barbican that separates these two parts. But I think that is going to be a reasonable place to call it a day on the recorded podcast. Honestly, in terms of structure, that couldn't have gone much better. We've got to see the exciting element of going into the lands of the dead. We've got to see a sort of one of the versions of Act 1, I guess, of the adventure. Hints of all sorts of possible treasures and skills we might be able to find before venturing into the castle. We've seen where I think the real meat of the adventure will take place, which I think is going to be in the castle itself. Yeah, I'm having a lovely time with it. I would expect nothing less. Jonathan Green, Martin McKenna, always a reliable pairing. So, I'm going to go away and play Night of the Necromancer on my own time. I'll be back for you in just a few moments with some closing remarks. Tatty bye. I have finished Night of the Necromancer. In a break from tradition, I didn't immediately die after pausing the recording and was actually able to get through a decent chunk of the book before coming to an untimely end. I got to explore the outer region of the castle and a little of the inner region before a pair of knights with a penchant for rolling double sixes took me out for the final time. My immediate thoughts on Night of the Necromancer are that it's extremely good, better than Stormslayer, but perhaps not quite as good as Howl of the Werewolf. That rating may be influenced by my well-documented love of horror, but regardless of overall quality, I think this is certainly one of the most mechanically interesting books that Jonathan Green has contributed to the series. It's certainly a very strong book with which to bow out of fighting fantasy, and the 4 books he contributed to the second iteration of the franchise stand among the very best in the entire run. They have a distinctive voice, but they all feel absolutely part of the fighting fantasy world, and I think that's a very tricky thing to pull off. Fighting fantasy, perhaps partly owing to its links to Games Workshop and the Warhammer Fantasy setting, often thrives when the setting leans into a more early modern aesthetic, and that is the case here, although there's still plenty of medieval accoutrements as well. The premise of Night of the Necromancer is very strong, not least because it effortlessly straddles both gothic horror and traditional fantasy tropes. The notion of playing your own ghost seeking revenge for your murder is a strong one, especially for anyone who remembers Randall and Hopkirk deceased. Here, that premise is wedded to a narrative faintly reminiscent of Hamlet, complete with a gravedigger called Yorick. You'll run into spectral knights, queens of the damned, a hideous graveyard golem, and sundry other nightmare creatures, but you won't be finding many goblins or other fantasy staples. The focus is very much on undead monsters, as you might expect, and Green gets a lot of mileage from that feeling of returning home to find everything has changed for the worse in your absence. Structurally, this is fairly linear. There's a series of smallish hubs, each with a few encounters strapped to them, which you can usually approach in whatever order you like. Sometimes you'll be able to visit every location attached to a hub, but equally sometimes you'll have to pick and choose which options you want to take. It does make the book feel fairly long, which is perhaps my only substantive criticism. If you die in the later sections, then getting back can feel like a bit of a slog. It's by no means a serious issue, and it does give the book a very nice narrative structure, with the opening being fairly open, and then things funneling gradually towards a final confrontation with the Lord of Death as you progress to the dark heart of the castle. I think I might have preferred the area outside of the castle to be a little more expansive and the castle a little tighter, but that's just my preference for open areas over dungeons, to be honest. As dungeons go, I would describe the castle as quietly clever. It's very welcoming on the surface, but actually finding some of the various hidden secrets is quite the challenge. There's places where sequencing your exploration is important, and in order to have the best chance of beating the book, you'll need to do the central Barbican area in a way that maybe initially feels less than optimal, in order to find everything you need. Essentially, there's a spirit door gating off access to the final part of the quest, and in order to get through it, you'll need to have some kind of body. Rather generously, the book gives you 3 possible ways of gaining a physical form to breach the spirit barrier. There's a mechanical body made by the extremely talented blacksmith. There's an NPC you can try to possess. And perhaps most appropriately, you can try and animate your very own actual corpse. That is a lovely, grisly detail. Each has benefits, each has downsides, but you'll want to have access to all three in an ideal world to make sure you've got the best chance of finding everything you need before the final showdown. You may need to go back and pick up another body, for example, if you rather carelessly allow your first one to get all splattered. You do also get a chance to meet your faithful hound, and it can be a very useful assistant for certain fights, but there's also the possibility you might have to stab the very good dog to death if you made a bad choice earlier in the adventure. So it manages to be both heartwarming and brutal in the same book, which is awesome. With your ghostly hands being supremely unsuited to the business of fetching and carrying, there's a strong reliance on keywords and skills to carry the book until you've got some kind of body to help with the toting. This makes good sense, and the use of keywords is very well implemented. There's quite a lot, but it never feels overwhelming, and Green does a few useful things to help track them. Firstly, they're all written forwards this time. That really helps. In the castle, you'll need to know whether you've created a disturbance, and the keywords for that are all tracked with words beginning with B. Once you know this, you can record all these keywords together for easy reference. The keywords generally make sense as well, which is a welcome change. I think obtuse keywords have their place. They can create a sense of mystery when the text checks for them, which is sometimes nice, but I think having a conceptual link between the keywords and the events they are tracking is usually better, especially when there's quite a few of them. Though, if you have an extreme number of keywords, like in the Valley of Bones, you then go around and it makes more sense to abstract them again for simplicity. In Valley of Bones, I think it's just letters and numbers, which does make them very, very easy to keep track of on a character sheet. The quality of the encounters is generally high, though I do think they fall off a little bit towards the end, not in terms of absolute quality, but in their evocative elements. I think this is one of the challenges of trying to write a book with a proper sense of escalation. By the end, everything needs to be at a certain level of melodrama and impact, and paradoxically, that can make these kinds of encounters feel quite homogeneous. It makes all the sense in the world from a narrative perspective, but every so often I find that my favourite moments come earlier when you can run into more oddball and weird encounters, and there are some fantastic oddball and weird encounters in the run-up to the castle. We saw the strangely gossip-focused hermit, but if you go to the woods, you can run into a very old-school witch. She is much more of an evil figure, and the encounter feels creepy and unsettling. You can get some useful things out of her, but it will come at a terrible cost, and there is a lot to be said for running like the wind at the first opportunity. She's got a bunch of familiars who have names taken from actual accounts of witch trials. Pyewacket, which means pie thief, and Grimalkin, which means little grey man, were the names of cats owned by the accused witches of Belvoir in the early 17th century. Lovely detail there. If you head to the village of Sleeth, you'll potentially tangle with the hideous graveyard golem, an evil amalgam of corpses and graves that can absorb you into its festering mass, ending your adventure prematurely without going through the cycle of death and rebirth, which we will talk about in a bit. In Sleeth itself, you can meet Joseph Van Richten, the ghost hunter, who is the brother of the Van Richten you can meet in Howl of the Werewolf. He and his sidekick have the ability to trap you and incarcerate you in a special bottle in a way that definitely feels like a nod to Ghostbusters, but manages to do it in a way that isn't obnoxiously pleased with itself and shows a light touch. This, to me, is the perfect way to do a reference. A ghost hunter is a perfectly reasonable thing to have in a fantasy novel, and capturing a ghost in an enchanted bottle has parallels with all kinds of traditional stories. It's really only the trap that makes for a clear reference to Ghostbusters, being a magical bear trap which can hold you in place for Richten to finally capture you. The Ghostbusters vibes are very much there, but I think what's crucial is that it doesn't feel remotely odd if you're unaware of what's being referenced, and that is the sweet spot for me with this sort of thing. Now, the Gravedigger Yorick is perhaps a bit more on the nose, but it's a really fun little encounter, so I will forgive it. I'm less impressed with meeting your dead father on the battlements, but I guess if you're doing Hamlet in a story where you play an actual ghost, doing the ghost of your father on the battlements is probably a struggle to resist. You can chat with Yorick, who is unsurprisingly comfortable with the dead, and there's a helpful clue to a riddle on one of the graves. This is another very clever touch because the answer to that riddle is a bit of trivia, a phrase from the King James Bible, also used by Shakespeare and often referenced more widely. It's something you might well know just from cultural osmosis, but it's not something you can work out from the riddle itself, so it is nice to have the answer secreted in the text as well. And in fact, it's secreted in the text in 2 different places, which is very clever and impressively fair. There are a few riddles here, and although they're required for completion, there is nothing particularly hard. The answers to all 3 share a morbid vibe as well, and that really helps and cites them appropriately in the world we're exploring, which is an underrated skill when it comes to doing riddles. You'll need to convert answers to numbers, which tends to irritate me a bit, but doesn't happen a huge amount, so I'll let it slide. There's maybe one bit which doesn't quite work when you're trying to work out who you can possess in order to advance, and the book is determined that there's only one right answer, but there's actually a few people you could conceivably possess. The one that's right is right, for want of a better word, but I would like to have had at least the opportunity to try 1 or 2 of the others, even if it didn't quite work out. This is all niggles. In general, the book is very fair and the difficulty level is quite low thanks to your ability to die and come back. It's not without a challenge here and there. There are some tough fights scattered through the book, but I don't think there's enough of them that are required to actually make the book hard to finish once you know what to avoid. It's also very easy to get an additional point of skill early on, which reduces the difficulty considerably, and your dog will help with some fights, which makes others even easier. So there's not much that's strictly required to beat it. So long as you have a high skill and you can find some kind of magical weapon, you can simply throw down with the big bad at the end. So there are a bunch of different items you can find that will definitely make the final battle easier, and you know how much I like that kind of design. One of my favourite elements in the book is the skill system. You can gain access to 6 different skills, with 4 being pretty easy to find and 2 being more challenging to get access to. There's multiple opportunities to pick up every skill, which is nice because they provide both a lot of utility and also a lot of flavour. It reminds me to an extent of the Worlds of Darkness role-playing games, especially Vampire the Masquerade, where the designers went to a lot of trouble to make sure that there were special powers available that covered the vast majority of vampires from film and indeed fiction. Here, you get a really fun suite of ghostly abilities, from becoming invisible to moving objects by the power of your mind. You can walk through walls and make yourself into a terrifying apparition. Possession and a limited flight ability round out the list of powers. They all correspond with a traditional ghostly quality, as well as being extremely useful. Again, there's nothing that's absolutely required, but acquiring the different skills feels like an end in itself, and I like it when there's some kind of sub-goal, such as collecting all of the skills in a game book. It keeps things interesting on subsequent playthroughs and pushes me to explore areas I haven't been to before. The ghostly abilities also tie neatly to the new stat of will, which gets a good workout through the course of the adventure. There's a fair number of places to get more will, which is handy, because to get the various skills requires a successful will test. This makes it very useful that most skills you can have a few goes at acquiring. It mitigates the sense of disappointment when you fail the roll. It's rare to see a new stat deployed so well as this, where it underpins a key mechanic, but also there's options to have the player test their will in other circumstances that seem appropriate as well. It is doing a lot of work in the text and definitely earns its keep. It's a very sensible choice to make the starting score fixed as well. It really helps with the balance. The big element of the book that I haven't touched on yet is the fact that you can die multiple times over the course of the adventure. Each time you get banished from the world, you'll wind up in the realm of the dead and be given the chance to return to the realm of the living. If you do this section of the book right, you'll get back to the world of the living 3 times before your luck finally runs out. As well as returning your skill, stamina and luck to their initial levels, you may even end up with additional will or a useful item as a little added bonus. meaning that death doesn't even have to be a bad thing. It's almost impossible to overstate the impact of this element of the rules. You could easily have allowed the player to return a couple of times and called it a day, and that would have been revolutionary enough, but Jonathan Green has realised the sheer amount of design space that this opens up. Turning death from a bad thing to something that can actually be helpful if you don't go nuts is a brilliant inversion of everything fantasy gamers have ever learned. But it's slightly more subtle than that, because there are still times when it's a bad thing to wind up dead because of where you'll end up returning to the world of the living. You can end up skipping certain key elements of encounters, and this tension is brilliant. And there's more. The fact that you get your stats reset after a trip to the lands of the dead means that you have a lot more freedom to mess with stats, knowing that it can almost always be undone. It is a self-balancing mechanic. If someone really screws up, then it's likely they'll die soon and everything will get reset anyway. Knowing that there's a limited number of deaths preserves the tension, but crucially it means that you can actually do skill drain in a way that doesn't feel awful. You can cut the player's skill in half, reduce their luck to 0, and it won't matter at all once they actually run out of stamina. That will all get wiped. This is such a rare thing to be able to do, and it's to Green's credit that he doesn't go completely bananas with it. I assume because he recognises that skill drain will still feel rubbish even if there's plenty of mitigation available. I very much admire how the Sin Eater monster in the Realm of the Dead drains skill, which is then immediately replaced. There's so much design space opened up by this approach, and it works well because it fits thematically with the story. It feels appropriate in a way that simply doling out healing in a classic fantasy story wouldn't. It's the right mechanic in exactly the right story to make it feel good and feel balanced. It's strange to me how mechanics can land in different ways depending on their setting and their implicit rules. In a classic dungeon crawl, I think being able to resurrect a certain number of times would feel like cheating somehow. It would feel a very cheap way of balancing. Here, it doesn't feel cheap because getting stamina back otherwise is quite hard. There's a few fights that will generate a bit of stamina afterwards, but it is not that common, which seems appropriate for a ghost. There's enough downsides to being a ghost that the ability to come back from the dead seems balanced, even though it probably isn't. I think you could adapt something like this to a science fiction setting by having some bit of technology that can suffer damage and be repaired at certain points, basically making it as good as new, but using up other resources that are themselves limited. It's adaptable, but I think it will always require a degree of care to make it properly land. It's not something where you can just file the serial numbers off and insert it into any story for the mechanical benefits. There has to be some kind of trade-off in play, and that has to come from the story. You could certainly borrow the Sin Eater mechanic though. Making skill drain specific to a single fight and restoring it immediately is something you can definitely do. If you were feeling mean, you could pop a paragraph or two between losing the skill and getting it back to raise the uncomfortable possibility that it's permanent. There's an argument for saying that this might be the most mechanically innovative fighting fantasy book in the entire series, and what's striking is how easy Green makes it look. He's turned the conventions of fantasy gaming on their head, and it all just slots together as if it's the most reasonable thing in the world. You could argue that the whodunit aspect is pretty underbaked. It's kind of obvious by the midpoint who the villain is. There's only really two options, and you very quickly learn that it's not one of them, so it must be the other one. But I don't actually mind that. I think if you're going to do a whodunit, you need to build the whole gamebook around that set of mechanics, and actually that's not quite what Jonathan Green is trying to do here, but having that little bit of who could possibly be responsible does provide a bit of intrigue in the early part of the adventure and gives you an excuse to look for information. And being a dead person in ghostly form, information is necessarily going to be more impactful to you than stuff. So yeah, it's fine. I think it's also just a really good note to bow out on. Night of the Necromancer is another wonderful book from Jonathan Green, with some characteristically strong art from Martin McKenna adding to the atmosphere. It's, as always, very nicely written and strikes a good balance between gothic doom and gloom and moments of levity to keep things from getting too scary for younger readers. It's an absolute treat of a book and a fine swan song for Jonathan Green's time in fighting fantasy. It comes, predictably enough, highly recommended. That is all for this episode. Don't forget that you can support my nonsense over on patreon.com/HJDoom, where for as little as a single English pound or local equivalent, you get access to a whole bunch of gaming stuff, what me and my other half have written. It helps keep the podcast on the air and fund bonus episodes, like the next episode coming up, which is also going to have something of a spectral vibe to it. It's a listener suggestion, which is always a joy to me. I'm also finishing up a secret project for patrons as well, so look out for that at some point in the relatively near future if you're already a supporter. If you want to get in touch with me in the meantime, you can do so by email at hjdoomretrofun, all one word, @gmail.com, or by following me on Blue Sky at hjdoom. Thank you very much for listening. Take care, and I'll see you soon.